So do you think there is a relationship between the ratio uh, between the total number of keywords per campaign and number
Mm.
of negatives?
So this slides in really nicely to the next point. This was really interesting. Conversions per keyword,
Mhm.
conversions for keyword. So this relates to ACoS power ratio really nicely. And all of these accounts appear to have a really good amount of conversions per keyword. So what I mean by that is, would you rather have 10 exact match keywords that all get one conversion a month? Or would you rather have one broad match keyword that gets 10 conversions a month? Same, mathematically the same thing. Which one's easier to control? Which one's going to probably get you a better ACoS? And what appeared to be happening in these accounts is that they were going with the one broad match with 10 conversions a month. Why? What generally I saw was like, if you have 10 conversions a month in that one broad match keyword, you know how that's going to perform day in, day out. What is that? Every 3 days, it's getting a conversion. If you have 10 exact match keywords that get one order a month, you're going to have these long windows where there can potentially be 30 days, 45 days where this thing doesn't get a conversion. That becomes really difficult to optimize. You don't exactly know what to do with a keyword where you're looking at last 30 days. It has 3 clicks and no orders. What do you do with this thing? These accounts did not appear to have lots of those individual low click, hyper low conversion amount keywords. It appeared like they knew the appropriate level of segmentation. And this is really related to the ACoS power ratio, because it appeared like if you have 10 exact match keywords and you're letting these things rip throughout the entire month, it's possible that they get a conversion. And it's also possible that they don't get a conversion. If you have, you know, you're only getting a couple clicks a month on these things, you get one conversion on these things, maybe, and it might bounce from one conversions. It might bounce from 3 conversions in a month to no conversions in a month. That creates a lot of variability, which increases, that pulls the distance of non-converting spend. It increases that. Whereas if you sort of mash that in a broad match keyword, you tighten it up with negatives. Now all of a sudden you have this keyword that gets 10 conversions a month. That's actually really nice. You can like do something meaty with that. You know how much to bid, you know exactly what to do. You're going to be able to zero in on your target ACoS nicely. So this is related to the ACoS power ratio I mentioned before. It's related to the negative keywords I mentioned before. It's related, it's a commonality in their campaign structure. They didn't over segment and they didn't under segment. So they sort of understood how much they should be segmenting these things. And that I think is a really, I mean, we're like in advanced territory here. This is, but like that sort of highlights how they were segmenting. So they didn't only have single keyword campaigns, because that would break this rule, because you'd end up with tons of keywords that maybe or maybe don't convert in a month. But what they did was they were looking at, how do we build a structure that is consistent, that we know how this keyword is going to behave. It'll do so religiously. And that I thought was really interesting.
So of course it's I mean it all goes back to the principle of less is more. So you're trying to, instead of managing 10 different 10, 20, 30, whatever, however many campaigns with those exact matches, you got one broad where you are honing in on eliminating the negatives
Mm-hmm.
and therefore improving the ACoS further and further and further. It's
Yeah.
almost like you are really dialing
Mm-hmm.
the focus on your
Yeah.
camera to really get a good um, lock in on what you want to achieve. Yeah. Okay. So really, the more negative keywords, the better at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you were to create a negative keyword ratio in a campaign, that would have to be a pretty high number.
Right. Yeah. I absolutely. It appeared like all of these accounts, none of these accounts were loose, like loosey goosey. Like even the one with that was 70% automatic targeting, they just controlled it a lot with their negatives. They kept it under control. And I thought that was really fascinating. Just to slide into the last point. The last point is well, there's two more points. These two are more straightforward. You would imagine these to be true. They all had a very high percentage of sponsored products. So they had at least 80% sponsored products ad spend. They had none of them had over 5% sponsored display. In fact, having a lot of sponsored display was usually linked to having a high ACoS. So sponsored display, we're in the middle of 2024, appears to be something that increases your ACoS more than it helps. So all these had very little sponsored display. And I was also surprised that they didn't have, their sponsored products was pretty low too. I'm sorry, sponsored brands. Sponsored brands was pretty low too. They had about 10 to 15% sponsored brands, 80 to 85% sponsored products, and like a tiny sliver for sponsored display, which is, I think most people would guess this. I would have guessed maybe 20% sponsored brands, but I didn't see many accounts go that high.